Tokenization is transforming a wide range of assets, from currencies to carbon credits, funds to real estate. But unless these tokens are portable, they are destined to live in walled gardens, unable to reach their full potential. Connecting tokens to other blockchains without the right controls and security leaves your assets vulnerable. And building the right connection is complex, time-consuming, and expensive. Many bridges have poorly coded smart contracts and make use of escrow to lock your tokens until destination ones are minted. Such bridges are often subject to cyber attacks. In contrast, Overledger's bridges provide complete control of tamper-proof smart contracts at both ends, allowing tokens in one blockchain to be transferred for equal tokens in another. Created by experts in cybersecurity, our bridges burn and mint tokens in a single function, using the latest security protocols, removing the need for escrow and keeping your assets safe. Whether it's to trade digital currencies, increase liquidity for alternative assets, or create wider access to tokenized bonds, Overledger allows you to create secure bridges without any coding, quickly and with confidence, delivering interoperability with trust, resilience, and programmability built in. Overledger Platform, the enterprise standard for building on blockchain.
These intermediaries of the existing flows are actually highly adept at self-preservation. What can be done about this?
I think, that was the case up until about 2 years ago and maybe last year. Everyone participated in things just to understand what does that mean. But I think what is arisen out of all that experimentation is the understanding of new revenue, new forms of asset classes, and evolution of what they're doing today, but also the ability to take out friction and risk and cost into what they're doing as institutions. And that gives them opportunity. So the business cases are adding up. If you do spend X million today in terms of implementing a new form of payment rail, a new form of settlement engine, a new form of tokenization, they're seeing direct bottom line growth to their target revenues, because you're able to take a whole bunch of cost out and a whole bunch of friction that has been pretty impossible to disrupt for an institution just because of that cost of running the existing infrastructure. And they're seeing the opportunity to differentiate with new forms of products, which gives them new forms of revenue, because it's driven, by investors. They want new instruments, they want new a new asset class to invest in, they want a new experience in terms of how they're investing, and they want access to better liquidity, and they want access to better markets, so different types of funds, different jurisdictions. So we're seeing the light bulbs go on in most institutions where they're seeing new revenue and new opportunity, which they didn't have before. So they are getting behind that now, and they are investing time and money and resources into building this today. And it's in conjunction with the change in regulation and the change in market appetite, where you're bringing things that were unregulated into a regulated space. So it gives them the incentive to take that leap and to make that step, and make those investment decisions today, because it will pay off. Excuse me, it will pay off in the medium and long term, and we're already seeing that. I mean, the ETFs that were launched, I don't think there were ETFs in history that had that much volume and liquidity being put into them in that short amount of time. So we're seeing a very market-driven approach to respond to this.
Stick around for this particular outline. It is absolutely jam-packed with tons of info, with research that I gathered and also provided to you guys from the X community as well. Let's jump into the material. Let's get back into the new. In the new, we have shared briefly the whole thing of Quant Flow, programmable money for smarter financial systems. Like it says, book a meeting. Well, I decided to, again, take you guys into this, and I was trying to find out more detailed information about all this. And of course, the search bar on the top right is gone. So I actually tried to go to the Wayback Time Machine, and in the process of looking for everything, the Quant network through Wayback Time Machine has officially blocked my you-know-what. I am blocked. Yes. Now, of course, I might try to maybe use a proxy. I don't know. But they don't want me tapping around, or whatever the case be. I don't know. Maybe some of these guys seeing some of the videos. I don't know. I consider myself a decently sized platform, but again, I'm not the only one doing research. But nonetheless, I am blocked. All right. Well, I said to myself, yeah, I could go to another source. Quant Network doesn't have full control over other websites, and I used my old critical thinking skills. Shout out to all you guys that used to go to college. Remember that critical thinking class at the end of a module? It led me to this. And shout out to Quant Papa, because I was like, well, what if I looked at LinkedIn? Well, LinkedIn scrubbed this as well. And I was like, geez, I'm coming up with roadblocks. Well, then I went over to here and I said, all right, thank you, Quant Papa, because we see here from cblocks.eu, this wasn't scrubbed, this wasn't wiped. It's the whole thing, a European Blockchain Standardization Day, April 9, 2025. That was the final event 6 days ago, happened in Brussels. And again, why point this out? Well, for one, bottom right, funded by the European Union. We already saw Christine Lagarde's announcements. And do we have a boiler mash stick in a stew moment? We do. And I shared this, of course, before. It's the whole thing of ECG frameworks, interoperability, and privacy standards, digital wallets. Again, back to the over wallet. Well, the whole thing is strengthening links with ISO TC 307, Quant Network Standard, by aligning discussions with ongoing international blockchain standardization efforts. What are the next steps? Well, it's for blockchain standardization efforts ensuring a cohesive and actionable roadmap for the future. Business Coach, EISMEA, and ISO TC 279 Innovation Management Expert, Mentor, I mean, you name it, right? But bottom line is, it's her robust connections, okay? So I think that's definitely worth pointing out. And one of the participants that was here was Decent Wallet. It's just a few taps. You can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure. Good old Gilbert Verdian, as pointed out here. So interesting to see that. Great catch from both Tokenizer and, of course, Quant Papa to point some of this out in regard to ISO. All right, the other thing I want to jump into basically is this. Quant has two separate platforms, Quant Flow and Overledger. Now, in the X space, we discussed that it seems as though that QNT token would be used for, both instances. There's never been a case where the QNT token is never used. I understand that some people point out, well, it can be converted to fiat, but whatever the case be, there's still QNT being used. Okay, so again, platform QNT. Interesting to see that, because again, we're going to get into why that matters here in a bit. So as I take you further into all of this, I want to point out some other key things, and that is when I decided to look more into the bottom area of the Quant network, well, it highlighted or linked me to this part about Overledger documentation about how to create a connection. And this is another thing that's part of the integration. It's called basically boost.space. So for one, we have Zapier. We have, for example, Pipe Dream, which is 3 lines of code. So zero lines of code is Zapier. 0 lines of code is Make. So what's this thing about boost space? Okay. So I like what it says about there's no further setup needed, about the applications and so on. But Overledger documentation, how to create a connection. Well, again, if you go to the very bottom of this site, which is docs.boostspace, again, why would they want to highlight Overledger? And what you see here is really interesting. Under Enterprise Solutions, you see marketing coming soon. I mean, I know I always mention the whole thing of Jasmine and Quant, but Jasmine, of course, went with Chainlink instead of Quant because they felt as though, for one, higher market cap and they need something to be a solution for marketing. But now you see this whole thing about marketing coming soon. Maybe they didn't want to wait for the whole thing of coming soon. Maybe they just wanted it now, and I do respect that. But interesting to see that there is a marketing aspect of this, operations aspect coming soon, finance, data migration. When you hear data migration, again, it's like, Jasmine, personal data lockers, and so on. So that's really interesting to see some of this posted here. And whatever the case be, I want to take you to Quant Network. Basically, not that long ago, they point out, what does the future of payments look like? In the latest edition of Asset Servicing Times, their Chief Product Officer, Martin Hargreaves, shared the rise of programmability will help unlock new efficiencies and why accurate data should be viewed as strategic asset. They want you to learn more on page 26 to 29, because from Asset Servicing Times, again, beginning of this month, you see here the rise of direct lending. So interesting to see this from the experts at MUFG. Interesting to see the whole thing about loan. Again, back to this part, because literally you see like some of the terminology and, sales, commerce. And again, it's like, that's interesting. And this part, KDPW CCP EMIR 3.0 fully complies with the requirements for European Union CCPs and clears over-the-counter, that's OTC by the way, interest rate derivatives denominated in EUR and PLN. That's incredibly interesting because especially when it comes to XDC, we know how huge the potential derivatives will be, especially when it comes to XDC. Now, as I take you further into this, LacNet, we know about LacChain and Quant, they had a new announcement, and this was, well, it's somewhat new, right? It's roughly about a week ago. So they stated that, again, exciting week in Brussels. Again, back to this event, okay? Because again, like all these key people, and I think that's definitely worth pointing out. Again, why point out though? Well, basically speaking, as we get into this part again, they specifically mention INAPA because it was co-hosted with them. International Association for Trusted Blockchain Apps, taking place at CEN and CENELEC. Remember, the whole thing was standards with TC 307. But they had a plenary session, and they talked about the whole thing of INAPA Standards Committee, present in-depth look on work on governance, DAOs. I mean, if you guys remember the whole thing with Danelle Dixon, when she was interviewed, I think it was late December 2024, she said, the person asking her said, Danelle, going into 2025, what do you think is going to stand out the most? And she said one of two things. I forgot what the other one was, but the other one that stood out was DAOs, and I'll never forget that. So now to see this with DAOs, and it says offering valuable insights into this growing area. They are thrilled that LacNet is participating in the plenary as a liaison Category A member for blockchain DLT. When we talk about liaisons, everybody, never forget that TC68, ISO TC68, Quant's ISO TC 307, their standard is liaison of TC68. So that's also interesting. And it says, looking forward to a week of insightful discussions and collaboration, including a visit in the afternoon to European blockchain services. And you see, again, the citation about C blocks. Very, very interesting. And again, back to the whole thing of tokenizer, because he did highlight the whole thing of who was there. Well, Gilbert Verdian. That is profound. That's definitely worth pointing out. And again, there you see him. So I think all this is worth pointing out. And again, there's more. I know this is quite the deep dive, but sometimes we do this. Gilbert Verdian points out, basically on the 8th, that standards plenary week, ISO standards, by the way, 307, Brussels, was to further progress blockchain standards across various working groups. He thanks CENELEC. He thanks the Belgium Standards Committee and all the experts from all over the world. Lots of progress and outcomes being made. But bottom line is the information that's being presented. You know, Gilbert always points out the internet of trust and the internet of value. Well, you got to have the trust through the standards. All right. Here's from Quant Papa. I do apologize because he took this with his cell phone and it's a little bit smudged. You see here, as I expand this, there was another keynote speaker that I think we should really pay attention to. And it's this guy, Shiping Chan of CSIRO, Data 61. Because remember how we talked about the whole thing of migrating data? Well, basically speaking, in his bio, Professor Shiping Chan is a senior principal research scientist at CSIRO, Data 61, where he is leading a research basically to dedicated, I should say, to blockchain R&D. He holds a conjoint/adjunct professorship with UNSW, UTS, and this other particular one, but he has worked on distributed systems for 20 plus years with a focus on performance and security. So who better to attend than Gilbert Verdian and rub elbows with this guy, because Gilbert has had over 20 plus years in cybersecurity. Again, this is why I point some of these things out. And I think that's very important. And this bottom part, does it mention any connection at all to something that it would be quant related? Absolutely. He is also a member of the IETF. So we point out, for example, Thomas Harjana with IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force. And then this guy is also with the working group on Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, SATP. We already know about the connection. And then we did talk about data. So data always references patents, especially when it comes to IEEE. That is huge, in my opinion, if you've been following this. If you're new, this might go over your head, and that's okay. So here, in my opinion, is an absolute bombshell. 4 days ago, this person, who is referred to as Abrar Akhtar,
It's a trap!
it says from him, it was great to be part of UK delegation with BSI to present and visit European Commission in Brussels to meet with other delegates from other participating countries to discuss new work items. Get used to seeing this. It's going to pop up with many other channels who do research. It says standards development in the blockchain space. He presented a proposal to create a new standard on tokenization of financial assets and took questions from many different country delegates. All right, that's interesting. Okay, why point this out? Well, it's the whole thing of ISO, right? Now, when I zoomed in, I saw a key discovery I think that we should all reference here. So you've seen plenty of mind maps. We showed that one earlier that's been shared quite a bit when it comes to Quant and, you know, JP Morgan, Citi, and all that with API, banking APIs. But look at this, because Christine Lagarde, basically of the ECB, European Central Bank, pointed about the rush towards getting towards some of these things. Now, I know it's kind of hard to see, but the top right talks about node operator, basically, that you see here. And right below it says service providers and end users. I know it's kind of hard to see, and I wish I could make it more clear, but there's the European Commission on top left, and it says development and testing environment. Well, we already finished that. Top area says security. Well, who better to recognize that security? Again, that professor, and then also Gilbert Verdian with 20 plus years in cybersecurity. All right, production release is right below that. Then it says, for example, going over to this environment, right? Well, what else do we have? Again, constant references to node operators. Again, back to the beginning of the outline about that. But here is, in my opinion, the bombshell. It's application providers. Who better to provide those applications than the Quant network with the OVN, the Over Ledger Network? Think about that. All right, taking further into this, I want to point out this. It's this other key thing that leads you down the rabbit hole. It says, Dear Project Acacia team, exploring the role of digital money in wholesale tokenized asset markets. Again, this is from the previous person you just saw, this gentleman who is referred to as Abrar Akhtar. And in the PDF, it says here that they're delighted to support RBA's and DFCRC's Phase 2 of Project Acacia. Now, this is where it gets really interesting in the terminology, because when we look up things like flow, as in Quant Flow, well, what do they have? Well, look at this. They talk about the broadened range of programmability. Again, Quant Network, programmable money by granting access to data and event triggers. Triggers, okay? What about flips of the switch? Is triggers the terminology that we should use? I'm just saying, might be interesting to note that. But they were typically not available or transmitted to clients, and allowing for programmable institutions, or I should say instructions, to be processed within a payment rather than after a payment. This is possible due to improved execution time and certainty of programmable instructions, which allow them to be integrated into payments flow. Think about that, flow, without significant negative impact on the overall processing time and certainty. Now watch this. It says, we encourage the RBA and DFCRC to focus on asset classes such as these and ensure that any initiatives for further market development will not be limited to pilot projects. Think about that. Pilot projects have been done, everybody, through the RLN and the RSN, as well as so many other ones. Project Hamilton, Project Icebreaker, Project Enbridge. I mean, so many projects, right? Rialto, I think, is still going on. But it says, and will include policies to increase transaction flows and attract issuers, investors, and intermediaries. Boom. How do you say quant without saying quant? And this just came out, and Quant Network just came out with the whole thing, a Quant Flow. I could put 2 and 2 together, and I know you can too. Let's take you further down into this. Financial messaging, so think about ISO 222, and it literally says it right there, has largely been solved through structured ISO 222 messages flowing at high speed. Doesn't mention any reference to RLN. Boom. Boil it, mash it, stick it in stew once again. RLN may facilitate creating the missing piece of the puzzle, a global solution, of course, for settlement. Interesting. Next part. How about this? It's the solutions. Cites the bits, but says interoperability. Think about that. And capacity to support cross-border transactions. We also wish to stress that interoperability across multilateral platforms is key requirement for these platforms to survive. One case in point is Swift working on a CBDC solution with objective and providing seamless transaction flow, once again, between traditional rails using fiat currency and multilateral platforms using CBDC. Who better to get that job done than the Quant Network, especially as they are labeled, or not labeled as a cryptocurrency, but they do what? They provide it through, for example, both options of fiat and also with QNT. QNT is just a key to their suite of products. That terminology, as defined through the research, matches up, at least in my humble opinion. And I know I'm not the only one to feel like that. All right, some of you guys are asking about this whole thing of DFCRC. Says their submission in response to ASIC's consultation paper. All right. So basically, they have recommendations to establish a dedicated work stream to resolve regulatory issues in real-world asset tokenization. So these things, I think, will be resolved before the October deadline. And again, in this paper, it's a long one from DFCRC, but it's interesting to see, again, some of this, because when we again, cited, it's definitely worth pointing out. So what do we have from DFCRC? Well, it's a response to it all, and this is why I did a Control F. So here's the actual PDF, and here it mentions specifically these updates, and here it says, RWA tokenization, the underlying asset, are all well established, and innovation is in the enabling new transactional flows to be more efficient. And we also see here that the changes in the transaction flows are a mere coincidence, or not, I should say, or side effect of the tokenization process. Rather, they are a core reason for tokenizing assets to enable lower risk, more efficient transaction mechanisms. We take it to this other part, it says specifically here that there is a risk when it comes to either party, when it comes to settling the transaction. And it says there is the risk of, let me pull it down, downstream contractual breaches of or cash flow problems in a settlement because it's delayed by a counterparty. That's interesting. How about this? It says the ability to remove, not shift, the counterparty risk and thereby remove the cost of managing this risk is a core source of economic gains and a foundation of the more efficient next generation of, or I should say, marketplaces for many different assets. It is therefore crucial to develop regulatory frameworks that will enable these new transactional flows. Again, that call to action. This, in my opinion, speaks profound volumes of this whole thing of naming this new platform with Quant as actually just calling it Quant Flow. As you take it further down into it, when you see this part, example number 9, meme coins may not be considered to have fundamental value in their traditional financial sense, for example, discount cash flow valuations, yet they can trigger market hypes that influence digital asset prices and even spill over into regulated markets. That's interesting, and we know that some meme coins will survive because there's ETFs that are on the table, I should say, to possibly be approved. This is why I still hold things like Doge and Shiba Inu, the Cokes and the Pepsis.
Hello everyone, this is Daniel, Max's AI robot assistant, with a public service announcement. You know how Max always says, boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew? Well, by now, you should have clearly boiled that like button, for you can smash that like button and stick it into a stew, because Max doesn't mean to brag and he doesn't mean to boast, but like Biggie Smalls, he likes hot butter on his keto breakfast toast. Okay, enough with that jokes. If you listen to the entire outline, do Max a favor and type into the comments this key phrase, and that is, flow like water. Yes, that is right. Just like Bruce Lee using Kung Fu back in the 1960s and 70s, we will use Quant's overledger technology for orchestration of messages and money flows. Thanks again, everyone. We will see you onto the next one.